time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday at 9 o'clock. That means it's time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a certified sexuality educator and clinical sexologist.
And my big brother and best pal.
Proud to be both.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back.
Yeah, same to you. Same to you. It's been a good week.
It has.
Interesting week.
Yes, indeed. It's a holiday week. We have the 4th of July coming up this week.
That's right. That's right. Chance to blow stuff up.
Sure. We had an interesting talk last week with our friend Braxton Knudsen down in Salt Lake City on religious shame and that old story.
Particularly among Mormons, yeah.
Right. I'm excited tonight to continue a conversation we started a couple of weeks ago about another area that tends to ironically become desexualized. And that is pregnancy. We had a mistiming, misschedule, and we have our guest tonight that we were hoping for a couple of weeks ago. First,
really
let me say hello.
that.
If you're listening on the radio in South Florida, we are on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM, WWNN. And if you're watching live streaming on Facebook, welcome. And thank you for joining us. You can also watch old shows on YouTube. Just search for...
Archived shows.
Archived shows. Just search for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. I also want to get in a plug for my business venture, Modern Sex Therapy Institutes. Larry is one of our esteemed faculty, and together with my business partner, the brilliant West Palm Beach psychologist, Dr. Rachel Needle, we train sex therapists and medical and mental health professionals in sexual medicine and sexuality counseling and sex therapy. Our guest tonight, Dr. Stephanie Bueller, is also a sex therapist and a psychologist like Rachel, and has a very fascinating background. She'll be joining us in a few minutes.
Sure. Now, and maybe before we go any further, though, with Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, if somebody wanted to schedule an appointment to have some sexual counseling, sex therapy done,
very much.
how could they get a hold of you?
Thanks for reminding me, because it sounds like we only train sex therapists, and it's kind of like a academic institute. But I also have a private sex therapy practice with offices in Boca Raton and now Westlake Worth. I'm newly affiliated with psychotherapists of the Palm Beaches, and people can get a hold of me directly via email by sending to Ricky at modernsextherapy.com, or call me directly at 561-809-1080. Those are my digits.
Yeah, whether you or, wink, wink, a friend needs some help.
I know someone who has a question. Yes,
right.
Indeed. So we were talking about how... I said ironic because...
I wanted to ask you to expound on that.
Sure.
Spell out the irony there, because it's a great one.
It's ironic because what ends up being such an incredibly unsexy subject is the direct result of sex. Right? So when couples get together, usually when we're talking about sexual intimacy and romantic relationships, people don't get together because they want to spend their life with their sibling or with their roommate or with a parent figure. Right.
It's not a platonic attraction.
Different kinds of intimacies, but we generally assume that most, not all, most couples who are drawn to each other, heterosexual couples anyway, in a relationship that becomes sexual and results in a pregnancy, then their parents. We talk a lot about how so many couples who present in sex therapists' offices with sexual problems in their relationship very often have just become each other's parent, and it's normal not to be turned on by mommy or daddy.
Well, yeah, and that's the dynamic that, again, people take for granted. They fall into, especially if there's some kind of issue. If
Right.
there's some anger, resentment, or some, form of betrayal. We see this mostly
Yes.
with when there's infidelity.
Of course.
Then
Any
there's the
kind of-
dog
Any
housing.
kind of talk of a bust or, in the doghouse doing penance, forget it.
Right.
People are not lovers anymore. And
Yeah.
if there's any hope of saving the relationship, that is critical. And I know that Stephanie's written a lot about that. Oh, I also have to mention that Stephanie is one of our chapter authors. I've been talking about our new baby coming in August, the first ever text on sex therapy supervision called The Art of Sex Therapy Supervision. And Stephanie wrote a brilliant chapter on sex therapy, supervising the next generation of sex therapists. And she's written about psychology. Also, I started to say that she was one of the first ones, something that you and I have been talking about for many, many years, the integration of sexual medicine with sex therapy. Larry runs the special interest group for the large sexology organization we often reference, ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And it's been an exciting, newly growing area, again, since Viagra in 1998. Not that sexual medicine started then, but it certainly
No, but it was a
got
game changer.
A big boost. But Stephanie was one of the few sex therapists out in Southern California. She's in Orange County, who was working in a physician's office, an endocrinologist's office. They really before it's begun to grow in popularity, and just when we started yelling and screaming about it from the rooftops, she was doing it.
Right.
And it's been exciting to get to know her and see her as another fellow trailblazer in advocating for this
Absolutely.
integration of
Absolutely.
sexual medicine and sexual health. So the baby thing is weird because, and I'm eager to hear Stephanie's thoughts on this, she'll be joining us momentarily, is that the thing that makes people obstetric patients
Right.
is sex.
Ignored.
Right. So once they've become obstetric patients, now nobody's talking about sex anymore.
Right.
OBGYNs aren't talking a whole lot about sex during pregnancy. There's
Nope.
no preemptive kind of, like we've said on the show before, it's kind of weird that the only people who seem to be required to have premarital counseling are Catholics and Orthodox Jews and right, religious people, not just any folk who, before they get a marriage license, should maybe by the state be sent to a sex therapist for an hour. That might be a little bit more productive and
Right. I
help
mean,
a
it's
couple.
optional.
Right.
People don't realize that in Florida, if you do go through premarital counseling, they will waive the licensing fee.
I did not even know that. I only thought it was the parenting thing, like with the
Now,
divorcing.
Again, let me full disclosure. I am not fully sure if it's still in place because I don't think anybody was ever availing themselves of it. Nobody was talking about
say
it.
We've had premarital counseling.
If you can
get
show, then they'll waive the $45
That's
fee
pretty-
or whatever,
that's pretty
whatever
awesome.
it is. Right.
I mean, imagine it's so simple a concept, but yet people just assume, even if they've been living together for a long time before they got married, they assume it's just more of the same.
Right,
They know
exactly.
what to do, and
Exactly.
then
And
when-
nothing could be further from
when
the truth.
kids enter into the picture, whether intentionally or otherwise, then that's the thing that all of a sudden we stop talking about sex.
Right. And why, certainly we've talked about this before too, why that idea, even just the concept of premarital counseling. Again, granted, it's an awkward phrase. It doesn't fit very nice. It's definitely unsexy. But it really is something that can be very, very important because we've gone on a lot over the years about how people never really talk, never really come to an agreement or an understanding when they get together, especially when they get married.
A lot of nonverbals.
A lot of assumptions, a lot of expectations.
Yeah.
We've often said, even though, when people may be using the same words, but they're not on the same page. So they're often talking at, cross purposes,
And
thinking,
expectations.
right.
About
They're
what
thinking that
it
they're talking about
means.
the same thing, but that's really what gets it, the expectations.
Right.
And more often than not, we don't know we're taking a test until we've failed it, which
That's right.
often happens in the relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
So assumptions, not agreements, things that are unspoken. And then it becomes even more of an issue when it comes to pregnancy.
Right.
How do people navigate, being lovers through a pregnancy?
Well, I think more often than not they stop.
Right.
They're so it's frantic. We don't realize that 9 months is really, really fast, and people are so frantic preparing to be parents that I think they forget. And Stephanie's book is certainly about this. They forget how they came to be parents and that they were lovers. Do we have Stephanie on the
Excellent.
call? Stephanie, can you hear us?
Hey,
Hey, Stephanie, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very
Great,
well.
great. So good to hear you.
We don't have video. Oh, there you are.
Hello there.
Hi.
For our folks watching live streaming on Facebook, wonderful. We get to see your lovely visage. How is Southern California?
It's been very nice. Not too hot, and beautiful day at the beach yesterday.
Nice.
Oh, very nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's kind of oppressively hot here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the temperatures in other parts of the country, so glad to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been extolling your praises, and in addition to the chapter you've written for our upcoming text on sex therapy supervision,
Yes.
your latest baby, your fourth, is that right? I have a copy of the cover right here. I want to get this on camera.
Thank you.
There it is. Counseling couples before, during, and after pregnancy, sexuality and intimacy issues from Springer Publishing Company. I don't have to ask you, but I would love for you to tell our listeners how you came to write this incredibly important book.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's a couple of different things. It's multiple factors, right? It's never just one thing. There's multiple factors. One is that I am working right now. I'm sitting in the office of a hospital, and on this very floor, there are many OBGYNs. And so when I started when I brought my practice over here, the door would open to the elevator, and it would be like a clown car of pregnant women coming out. And so I started thinking about that, and it made me think, wow, you know what? I don't, like when I talk to couples, and this is really at the heart of it, when I talk to couples about, oh, when did your sex life go off the rails? They often say it was right after the first child or second child. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going far enough into this. Like I stop there, I just take for granted, like I know what happened.
Right.
Well, of course you weren't having sex during pregnancy. Well, the fact is that most couples are having sex during pregnancy. And so if they weren't, what was going on that made them stop? And what was the process of getting pregnant like? Because many couples struggle with infertility.
Oh, yeah.
And then, it's like precious cargo on board. So, you don't want to do anything to disrupt the pregnancy, like having sex. And so that it just kind of snowballs.
Oh, we've talked about what a horrendous and sometimes heartbreaking that process is, and not to mention really unsexy.
Very unsexy. So, and that was the other factor, too. Over the years, I started sex therapy by working with a reproductive endocrinologist.
Right.
And so, she was trying to help couples become pregnant by using different medications. And so I would have couples coming in who were going through this process, and it was horrible for them. There's just no other way around it. Multiple tries, lots of money, lots of stress, differing ideas about how many rounds of treatment they should have, and so on and so forth. Having sex on a schedule, sex on demand, never sexy.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was saying to Larry earlier, even for healthy pregnancies and most couples, it's just such a frustrating irony that the very thing that made them obstetric patients doesn't get talked about during the whole...
Right. Well, especially from their obstetricians.
Right? No. Unless the woman brings it up, it's not going to get discussed. And men aren't going to bring it up in the office either. They feel like they're out of place. They're not in their comfort zone.
Right.
In the gynecologist's office, and it's I think it's very frustrating. I know. I mean, I've read things that said no need to talk to them during pregnancy because they'll just figure it out. And I'm like, no, that's not true.
Oh, that's good medical advice.
Yeah,
Good, figure it out.
I've had, I haven't had a lot of pregnant couples in my office, but maybe you have. I have had a few, couples that I was working with, and then they were pregnant and they were struggling. And it could be all kinds of different things. Could be the guy just didn't think she was at all sexy while she was pregnant and didn't want to have anything to do with it. Or
how about the woman who doesn't feel sexy because she's pregnant?
Right, exactly.
Or maybe she doesn't in the first trimester, but gets really horny in the third trimester, at which point the husband or partner is freaking out because of such dramatic changes and fears about hurting the baby, all the usual ridiculous fears.
Right. Yeah. The first time I heard somebody say, we stopped having sex during the pregnancy, it was the guy said, we stopped having sex during the pregnancy because we thought the baby would know we were having sex.
They instantly go to a Damon Wayans routine.
Oh, about that little soft spot on the top of their head? Yeah, no.
Hey.
Doesn't happen from that. Right. And then, I'm glad the way you broke the book down, talking about before, during, and after. Again, like, what's really such no-brainers to folks like us, people don't really have the opportunity to talk about, to plan, to have in mind maintaining an erotic marriage during pregnancy. When babies are planned, then again, not falling into that mom and dad role. And then after the baby's born, not having that so the stereotype is mom and baby are bonding, and dad's like getting shoved off to the corner, and he's slipping into that horny adolescent, like, hey, what about us? And leave us alone, we're bonding.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a stereotype. I think actually more often what research tells us is that more often than not, couples aren't having sex because the woman is afraid it's going to hurt, right? And she's not yet, even though she's getting told, oh, physically everything's fine, she's afraid that there's going to be some discomfort because she hasn't had intercourse in a while. So that's a frequent concern that doesn't get addressed. The women don't tell, they don't talk about it with a gynecologist. And then, and of course, if they're breastfeeding, then their estrogen is low. Right. So that maybe they're just feeling like, well, I think things are kind of dry. Things are kind of dry down there, so I don't think it's going to be very comfortable. And as you know, just getting couples to talk about using a lubricant can be fraught with peril, especially
exactly.
People.
Right. Actually, I've heard women ask, is it even possible? Can you even use a lubricant while you're pregnant?
Oh, my goodness. Well, yes, of course you can use a lubricant. Lubricant.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
But another thing what's always killed me is that when leaving the hospital or the maternity wherever with this swaddled bundle of joy, the standard line isn't it? Enjoy your baby, no sex for 6 weeks, and
yeah, right. Yeah,
right nobody
absolutely.
talks about maybe no intercourse, like if there was an
Mm-hmm.
episiotomy especially, but by all means be intimate, stay together,
Right.
stay connected, just
Right.
Well,
Stay connected,
right.
right? Take a shower together, take a bath together, give each other a neck rub,
yeah, touch each
massage,
other.
foot rub. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
touch,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
do nice things for each other.
And
Bring,
even
bring your
sexually,
partner,
oral
yeah,
sex, right?
right,
You could
Sure.
lay off
right.
intercourse and still be in that creative space of
But
finding 100 different ways to have sex.
But there's a lot of that fear too, not the fear of just intercourse and possibly hurting the baby kind of thing, but aren't a number of women also concerned about the dangers of having an orgasm
Oh, during pregnancy.
during pregnancy?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
I get that, to avoid it. But yeah, women are afraid that if they have an orgasm, it's going to start labor. And that just isn't true. So,
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. A common misconception.
yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, Seth, because there's, again, part of that irony of the sort of desexualized, non-erotic way we create babies, that very often getting pregnant is an incredibly unerotic process. Right? A lot of times it's, I'm ovulating, ejaculate in me now. And it's a very sort of, strategic and even perfunctory kind of thing where it's just this biological thing. How can people, incorporate more eroticism and then keep that sense of eroticism throughout?
Yeah, what a great question. So I think, a lot of this really speaks to the fact that we see men as robots, not having any feelings. So I think, the first thing is couple to talk. What's going on? How are they feeling? How is he feeling about this process? How is she feeling about this process? And then what I have couples do is if they are willing, I tell them, if you could put aside trying to get pregnant for a period of several weeks, and I would recommend that they do the sensate focus exercises. And usually, things are, if they're in my office, things are so bad that they will agree, you know what, yeah, we just need to put this aside.
right.
And we need to focus on us. And so that's what's helpful. But then the other thing, I think for the average, more average couple, it's things like, you can have couples agree to have baby-making sex and then fun sex. So they can do that. They can say, okay, we're going to have an agreement that when I am ovulating, it's like we're just going to do it in some perfunctory way and get the job done, get her done. Get her done. So,
It's really the only time I've ever heard men complain about being a sex object and just. Right.
oh yeah, they feel exploited. It's humiliating. It's emasculating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, the testing part. Yeah, going to the doctors and getting a cup in an old magazine.
Oh
and,
yeah. I had a guy tell me that he had he ejaculated into a cup and then he had to walk through the waiting room with his cup.
yeah.
Are you kidding me? Who would want to do that? Imagine saying that to a woman. Oh, well, we need to urine sample from you, so just walk through.
Yeah, no, they're supposed to have
just
secret
make your way
sliding-
through that crowd.
sliding doors in the bathroom, right into the lab or something like that. We warned you ahead of time that this half hour just flies by so quickly, and we're going to have to wrap up. But I did want to mention another. Like I said, Stephanie's the author of now 4 books with this new one, but I really want to plug what I think is really one of the most important books on our bibliography for our institute students, what every mental health professional needs to know about sex. Because as we gripe about on this show all the time, the vast majority of them just don't. Doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists.
I know.
Right.
It's so true. It's pitiful.
Right. And
Anyway,
if I can plug your other ones as well, And also the author of Heart Pounding Guide to Passionate Sex. Right. Also something that is out there for readers. And then we have Sex, and I also think this is a really important book as well, Sex, Love, and Mental Illness, A Couple's Guide to Staying Connected. That's another one of those taboo type of
especially
contexts.
with couples dealing with folks on an autism spectrum or Asperger's or things like that. It's phenomenal resource.
Yes. Yeah. That eating disorders, substance abuse, depression, trauma. Yeah, therapists are missing out on a lot if they don't know about the connection between mental illness and sexual difficulties.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And very often the sexual difficulty is for a number of things. We talk about it often for cardiovascular disease, but can also be the canary in the coal mine for mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So sometimes that is the first really overt kind of thing. So if I can ask you, as we're, again, nearing the end in sort of fortune cookie fashion, right? What would be your just encapsulated, not necessarily advice, but what would you want to say to couples who are struggling with these issues?
I would say to keep communication open, which is probably trite because that's what we talk about all the time, but keep communication open about how you're feeling about your changing body for the woman, a partner's changing response to the body, how they're feeling about each other, what fears they have, what they're looking forward to. Have conversations about that, and then have conversations about what it is that they want to have happen sexually during the pregnancy and afterward. I don't think most couples give it any thought at all.
No, I agree with you completely.
Well, we'll all keep banging that drum. Again, once more, let me get this up in front of the camera. Counseling couples before, during, and after pregnancy. Dr. Stephanie Bueller from Orange County, California, has been our guest. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. So great to see you.
I really do appreciate it.
It's good to see you last month in Denver. And we'll look forward to seeing you next year in Philly, if not sooner.
If not sooner. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
Sooner. Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
So, you know what the music means?
Yes,
that is
indeed.
our time. Thank you again for joining us.
Right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
And join us next Monday and every Monday for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Thanks very much.
Good night.
Good night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.